Welcome to Invest. We talk about investing, finance, and professional development. As the current time of 10:36 a.m. on the Eastern Time on Saturday, March 11. Hope you guys have a good week, good weekend so far. Ethereum code $1,443, up about 0.91% so far. Respect to overall crypto market and the equity market, obviously today is a weekend, but with respect to the equity market, this week has been a relatively depressing one, as we are seeing some sort of a comparable type of how would you say experience with respect to the collapse of Lehman Brothers that happened during the global financial crisis, but this time is with respect to Silicon Valley Bank, SVB, on their basically collapse in 2 days, which I will dive into a little bit more. But on the market front, obviously, it's been relatively dampening, and Ethereum has been able to sustain at the level of support of 1450 ever since the broken of the wedge, that we were lingering on around the 1650 as a first level, which is relatively non-substantive, to the next level of 1550, which is a relative substantive level. But obviously, with the SVB catalyst propelling the market to sell off due to just liquidation issue among the spectrum, we glide down to the next level of 1450. And as the fear, further cultivate as the market closing, as of yesterday, to basically confirming that SVB it is really, is completely finished. That we reached to a point of 1350, as a subsequent support level. Okay. So we'll dive into the technical in a bit to see how is that going. But before we do that, let's take a look at the equity market front. It was definitely a sell-off day. We were down 1.5%, which gliding to a level that we have identified, that is supportive because it's a substantive technical level, which again we will dive into that in a bit. But in more of a qualitative perspective, taking a look at the main news that's been percolating among the media front, this is what's really happening in front of us. The second biggest bank collapse in U.S. history happened in just 40 hours. This is showing how fragile the market is. This is showing how fragile the Silicon Valley venture ecosystem is due to its historical pump and dump and also hype valuation. Put one bank into this spiraling, negative spectrum, that they were at huge amount of financial exposure that cultivated into this collapse, basically. So on a high level points, the company SVB went on to a downward spiral begin on late Wednesday, when it surprised investors with the news that it needs $2.25 billion to shore up its balance sheets. And we'll dive into why that is. And as that percolates, obviously, it freaked a lot of people out. And next thing you know, we realize that the bank is basically on the verge of closing up because its liquidation issue that bubbled up into $42 billion of customers' capital just fleeing out of SVB, which just cultivate and fuel the downward spiral that it was already in, right? And now with the big problem is, how are these remaining of the folks that maybe they were traveling overseas, they were not really keeping up to date with respect to the news, they're probably on vacation right now, and next thing you know, they come back from their vacation or from their trip, or they were not on time to really take their money out to withdraw with respect to the time frame before, the CI, the California regulatory regulation. I think the CIBC closed it down. Just based on protections of investors, but also for regulatory front. So what's really the fundamental reasons behind this whole collapse, right? And I want to just basically boil this down to the most simple, digestible reasoning for you. So, with respect to the recent rate hikes that we saw from Jerome Powell on the FOMC meeting and the CPI report, and their regurgitation on the recent verbiage that we heard from Jerome himself, SVB collapsed mainly due to the outpacing of rising interest rates in comparisons to the pace of the financial capacity that SVB's balance sheet was able to basically sustain. So look at it two ways, right? So the deposit outflows and the security losses, these two factors, with the rising interest rates, SVB have doubled their loan book since 2019. Okay, think about that relatively speaking. And with the investing horizon being longer durations in fixed income, it has a negative mark to the market as the rates move up. Obviously, it balloons based on the rate increases. And eventually to the point that SVB has hit something that you would call what we call a margin call, that they have to realize their losses because they hit that certain financial threshold to protect their balance sheet as deposit flows out larger than expected. And obviously with the further fuel of this negative outflow of $48 billion from people exiting in the span of 48 hours, it just completely crashed and melted SVB in the span of a very short amount of time. So basically, you could say that SVB collapsed due to the Fed's rising the rates a little bit too fast for them to maneuver, and next thing you know, with a negative PR of asking for money from public market of raising $2 billion, it just turned this into a negative spiral, cultivating into an additional $48 billion being pulled out of the bank, and that was the collapse of the bank. It was a domino effect that we saw in a very blink of an eye, and obviously with this similar affectation to like what happened with Lehman Brothers. Basically, they just like couldn't sustain. The balance sheet has blown up because of overexposure, and on top of the fact, knowing the fact that SVB, it is in the venture space, with a lot of startup companies that are, inexposed, financially, in exposures financially, that obviously drive this balloon to be even worse than before. So that's really on a high level explanation. Hopefully that makes sense. But if you don't, like, let me know if you have any specific questions on below. So basically, on a very high level, just to recap everything that I talked about, the reason the SVB crashed is because the Feds raised the rates too quick for them to maneuver, that eventually put them into a negative spiral and shut down the bank because of outflow was outpacing the inflow of the bank, which is what the company does, right, to circulate capital. Okay, so before we do that, the technical on the Ethereum front, let's just dive into the recent affectation around BlackRock and ARK Invest to see how are they doing. So as of the closing day on Thursday, the Friday report is still coming out. It seems like it was a relatively neutral day. I don't foresee that they have had any specific exposure in SVB, despite SVB it is they're not apples to apples, right? BlackRock is more of an asset manager rather than just a more of a commercial bank. And then BlackRock, you could see that it was ARK Invest was a more of a relative sell day in comparison. But what they were doing, I don't think they foreseen or knew enough about this exposure, knowing the fact that they are themselves a financial institution. So seems like it was more of a neutral day, just in comparisons to how the overall macro market reacted. So let's just dive into technical with respect to recording time of 10:45 a.m. on the Eastern time. We are at 14:50. You can see that with respect to the negative wedge that we're forming, it broke down, and now we are relatively oversold, right? 33 out of 70. Let's see on the weekly. We are about to form a death cross at 47 out of 70 on a weekly, which is something we appreciate because we've been kind of waiting for this to happen. And on the Bitcoin side of the equation, you could see that the upward wedge was broken, which is translates into the sell-off that we're seeing right now, but also being fueled by SVB, obviously. The daily, you could see that we crashed the level that we have talked about, 19,500, which is a good level. We're very suppressed at 29 out of 70 right now. Weekly, it is looking like we might see a little bit more sell off, because the level that we should technically get to would be 19,500, but like also levels below at 19,000 is also tolerable as well. And then with respect to the index front, like take a look at the equity market, you could see that obviously we have broken and sold off quite significantly at 35 out of 70 on the RSI spectrum. On the weekly, we're about to form a death cross right now, which is, we are still in this formations of this reverse head and shoulder at 346 as the bottom. This is the head, shoulder, and shoulder. As we come down further and further, 45 out of 70. But what this is saying is that in the near term, we might see some reversal. Like Monday is typically a green day, but just know the fact that weeks out we are gonna see a little bit more choppiness, knowing the fact that the death cross on a weekly is about to be formed. But once we get that over the hump, I do foresee that on the monthly and the weekly and the daily will be all aligned. And like monthly, it is translating into a bottoming out of a reversal that should be happening. So that's something that we appreciate. Okay. It is unfortunate with what happened. Let's pray for the ones that was exposed in SVB, both as a client, but both on the human capital front. It was interesting that one of the SVB private banker did invite me for dinner on a Tuesday, but with respect to my conflict of schedules, I had to reschedule. But seems like that might not be happening anymore, because my respective the private banker seems like he probably lost his job. So it's an interesting and also just disheartening, experience that we're seeing. I mean, venture has, historically been a lot of just hype and valuation manipulations. And when something happens, and this flips on the wrong side of the spectrum with a large amount of capital, someone will be the scapegoat. And in this case, SVB was the scapegoat. So hopefully this is helpful. Unfortunately, this is the news that I have to kind of report back, and it is definitely negative. There's no way around it. But appreciate you for joining me today on this Saturday and digesting what happened. Have a good one, and let me know if you have any questions. Take care. Bye.